struggle with it. And goodness gracious knows the times and what we're, as a nation and as a planet, that we're going through right now with COVID and with unrest across the world, disasters. Most of us are aware of one in Afghanistan, and here locally too. COVID hits all of us, cancer. We have reasons to be afraid. We all struggle with it, but God has promised to protect us and to walk us through any sort of fear or danger we might have. If we look at Psalm 139, and it's verse 7, God tells us there, and again, that's Psalm 139, 7. He tells us we can't hide or be unseen. So no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, God is aware of the situation. He sees it. He knows what we're struggling with. He knows what we're afraid of. Oh, there's never a time when God doesn't know exactly what we're dealing with. And the words there on your handout are hide or be unseen. Most of us are familiar with the 23rd Psalm, and God promises that even in the shadow of the valley of death, even there, He's there with us, and He'll provide for us, comfort us, and protect us. In Philippians 4 and verses 6 and 7, God says, don't worry about, and the blank there is anything. I don't know about you, but I have problems with that. I worry. And there are things I am naturally afraid of. God tells us not to worry about anything. I'm not there yet. Not sure I ever will be. What do? You focus on your faith and the promises that God has given us that He'll get us through it. There are valleys and mountains, and I can tell you when my focus is where it should be, my prayer life is where it should be, I can sit a lot higher. And you get a little confident, God's got my back, I don't need to talk to Him as much, and somehow or another you jump off that cliff again, and you wind up back down in the valley having to pray your way out of it again. It happens. But God tells us, don't be afraid or don't worry about anything. And then if we go to Isaiah 41, verse 10, and Isaiah has got to be one of my favorite books in the Bible. Encouragement-wise, I get more out of that particular book than anything else in the Bible. Isaiah, I love God's word in that. And it says, don't be afraid. I am with you. And do not be afraid. I am with you. And that goes back to that, we can't hide or be unseen. God's with us all day, every day, all night, every night, 24/7, 365, the current saying. God is always with us. We can depend on that. The Bible says 365 different times, do not be afraid. Or there's one blank, we can say, don't be afraid. That's a deliberate daily reminder on God's part. Don't be afraid. 365 times. Sometimes we as humans, my dad used to say, you're so bullheaded and stubborn, the way you learn is to have it beat into you. Well, in some form or fashion, 365 times, do not be afraid. God's beating you over the head with that. He's telling you that, I'm not being subtle about this. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. I've got this. If you'll just have the faith and trust to let me handle it. Now, does God always handle it on my schedule? No, He doesn't. Wouldn't it be wonderful and easy to wake up in the morning, look at your forearm, and there's the printed instructions from God for the day. Here we go. If I got that, God said it, there's my instructions. I can walk with it and get it done. That makes it easy. God requires more out of us than that. I don't know I've never gotten that message on the forearm. Sometimes things are a lot clearer than others, but the tighter you are with your prayer life, the more obvious that sort of thing, that sort of message, that sort of word from God is going to be. Let's go to Mark 4, and we're looking at verses 35 through 40. Mark 4, 35 through 40. And it's a story that a lot of us are probably familiar with. And I think I went to New Living on this one, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mark 4, 35 through 40. And you will see this story also repeated in Luke and in Matthew. But the way it's spoken here, to me, you pull a little more background out of. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Let's look at this. The word for fierce storm in Greek is actually lilac, like the flower. It's lilac. And the sea that they were going across is in a valley. And it happens on a relatively regular basis because of the terrain and what happens there. The wind can kind of funnel in, and it's not really a tornado, but it fuels these fierce storms. And remember, on this boat, we're talking about quite a few of these men that were fishermen. They're used to being out on the water. They've dealt with rough wind and rough waves before. And they were afraid for their lives. So this isn't even for that sea. This is not a typical storm. It's above and beyond. This one is bad. They're afraid for their lives. The wind is coming into the boat. So it's not a normal storm. It is severe. It's fierce. And today, in today's day and age, we're going through fierce storms. We're experiencing lilacs. Whether it's COVID, whether it's war, cancer, we're in the middle of all of it. And Jesus is with us. Jesus in the boat now, if you read in verse 38, he was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. So this wasn't I'm going to lean against, part of the ship here or the railing, and I'm going to take one of these little casual cat naps. He got a cushion. He's going to bed. I'm not just taking a casual nap. I'm going to get some rest here. And he laid down with a cushion. Some of the folks, he got his best version from back then of the My Pillow, and he's laying down, and he's going to get some Z's here. He's catching it. And he is completely asleep. Jesus knows what's going to happen, so he wasn't worried about it. And then the disciples wake him up, and he commands the waters to be still. Total stillness. And then he asks them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Now notice here, he doesn't say, "O ye of little faith." We've heard that phrase many times. He said, "Do you still have no faith?" They've been traveling with him. And at the very beginning in verse 35, you read, Jesus said to his disciples, we are going to cross to the other side of the lake. So he said, you're coming with me. We're going to the other side of the lake. And then he rebukes them. Do you still have no faith? I'm with Jesus. What's he going to do? Let all of us perish? And they've been with him. They've seen who and what Jesus is. And so he rebukes them fairly sharply. You're hanging out with me, and he doesn't use the word little faith. You've got no faith? All of this time, and you haven't seen who I am? I'm thinking now, as a disciple, what am I doing? I'm probably hanging my head like, all of this time, where have I gotten? Where's my head? Did I pick up on who Jesus is? Why don't I have faith? This time he didn't say, well, you're still in second or third grade, you're learning. He's like, have you even been to school yet? Well, what do we need to do? And we go to the next set of blanks here. Focus on faith. Not on the circumstances, not on the situations, not what this world is bringing to us or making us deal with. We focus on the faith. God will carry us through it. Real world faith takes effort. It doesn't just happen naturally. We have to work at it. Saying you have faith, well, that's easy. That's not a chore. Applying faith is a whole different ball game. It's difficult, and it takes practice and work. You strengthen with practice. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, if you were a Roman soldier and you got your choice among the leaders, which one did you follow? The guy with the scars. Because he had been through the battle and the war, and he survived. He knew how to get through it. Well, along the way in our Christian walk, we're going to pick up some scars. It goes with the territory living on this planet. There'll be a day when all of that will go away and we'll be cured. But right now, we're going to pick up some scars. It's going to strengthen us. A teacher, I don't know about you, I was never, eager for it, but what does a teacher do? She gives you some tests to see if you've picked up the knowledge that she's been putting out there, that she's transferring. Well, here's a test from Jesus. Here's some wind and some waves. What did you do with your test? Well, looking at Jesus' last statement there, if I had to guess, I would say they didn't get a passing mark. Jesus will put us through some tests. This world will put us through some tests sometimes to develop us, take us from 3rd grade to 4th grade. I mentioned a week ago, or two, my dad and the captain that came and invited Dad to come inspect him. And he looked at the shavings and the pencil sharpener well, he knew the guy was going to have the main part of his job done. But that was a developmental tool. I'm going to take you to the next level. We're going to start looking at other details. I thought about sharing this, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. This is probably spiritually or relationally one of the roughest experiences I have ever been through, if not the roughest. I went through OCS, and the version that I went through is a tough one. That's Officer Candidate School. We started with 52, and we graduated 16, which will tell you something about that course. And probably a third of the way through, maybe half, we were down to the core of 16 that actually wound up graduating. And one night, all of our TAC officers, our instructors, pulled us into a small room, something about this size. And there were all 16 of us lined up. And these are the guys and a few gals that had survived this far into the course. Physically, we had picked each other up. And we all have weak spots. Where we were weak, the guy next to you used his strength to pick you up and carry you along. Maybe it was paperwork. Maybe it was something technical. Maybe we were doing an exercise where marksmanship was a big thing. But these were the people that you had survived with. We had each other's backs. We had bonded. And they pulled all 16 of us out in a room, and one by one, they pulled us up, one at a time, individually, and you had to look at the other 15 candidates that were standing there with you and pick out the 3 worst candidates and look each one of them in the face and tell them why they were the 3 worst in the bunch. I got to tell you, that you want to talk about a serious gut check. These are my friends. You know, when I was short on paperwork, these are the guys that sat down and filled it in for me. These were the folks where they couldn't handle the 80-pound pack. And so a couple of us would take 40 pounds apiece and carry the load for them. And here I am picking out 3 out of these survivors with me and telling them why they were deficient. That's a haunting memory. Why did they do that? And I'm still not sure I agree with the methodology, but I know why they did it. It's another level. There are times when, as a leader, you've got to look somebody in the eye that works for you. And even if you like them personally, you've got to look them in the eye and tell them, you're not getting it done. And we're going to have to do something about it. I hope I never have to go through that in life again. I can't tell you how. There's a scar left from that experience, big time, and it'll never go away. But there's a learning experience involved in it too. And sometimes we pick up some deep scars in the process of going from point A to point B. We're not, what's the song? You know, didn't promise you a rose garden. God didn't promise us that. There's a story, young man, he's riding on an airplane, you know, a passenger plane. He's about 8 or 9 years old, and the woman across from him is, let's just say she's over 50. And one of her first times on an airplane, and they hit some turbulence. And the airplane begins to do some of that shifting, and she is absolutely beside herself. And she's looking for extra seat belts and parachutes and whatever else she can find. It's nerve-wracking for her. And sitting next to her is this little 8-year-old that's still in his little puzzle book, and it's not bothering him at all. Not one bit. And she looks at him, and doesn't this scare you? Why doesn't this upset you? And he says, my dad's the pilot. We have the best pilot ever. And we're going to hit some turbulence. But our pilot will guide us through it. Tom, here's where I asked you to kind of be a part of this. Sometimes a little physical demonstration will help something sort of stick with you. It'll kind of hides in your memory. All right. And you can see what's written on the front of this. And Tom is holding it, but that's not a box full of feathers there by any stretch. You can see there's a little bit of stress in his arms as he holds it. And that's what baggage does to us. Anger, pride, jealousy, fear, it weighs us down. And we shouldn't carry that around with us all day, every day. But if we substitute that, and instead we go to what happens? Love, humility. You see what I've got written there? And now, pick up that box. Go ahead, pick it up. Lift it up. Lift it up high. You got it. You got it. Lift it up high. Well, there's a weight there that he probably could not have handled on his own. But if we get rid of all that baggage and we live in love, humility, and generosity and confidence, all of a sudden that baggage isn't too heavy anymore. Right? Thank you. It takes focus and concentration. But all of us, me included, we carry too much baggage. We live with too much baggage. We need to get rid of it. We need to pray out of it. And that's really how you do that. You talk to God and you pray out of it. Do I have anybody that's playing a closing hymn for us tonight? Today? Thank you. We're going to go to